Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kazuya Ishii. I am conducting Gandhian studies at Kagawa University. It is a great honor for me to be invited by the Embassy of India to celebrate the 152nd anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth. First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Sanjay Kumar Verma, the Ambassador of India to Japan, for this invitation, and also to Mr. Taichi Watanabe, a staff member of the embassy who has kindly corresponded with me to arrange today's talk. As the embassy requested, I would like to talk on Gandhiji's thoughts in relation to the current spread of COVID-19. I regret that I cannot leave Kagawa for Tokyo due to the current rules of my university. So I am sending this video message to you today. Although public health is not my field of study, nor am I an expert of pandemic studies in particular, I am hoping that I could say something about it from the viewpoint of Gandhian studies. But first, I would like to briefly review what COVID-19 is all about, especially how it has spread across the world. Second, I am going to share with you what I regard as the basic ideas of Gandhiji's about civilization and society. Lastly, let us see if we could draw any lessons from his thoughts as we face the current expansion of this disease. It was sometime in 2019 when an unknown virus started spreading in Wuhan, China. It was first said that the virus, having long stayed in bats, was finally transmitted to humans. Like the preceding kinds of viruses that caused SARS, MERS, Ebola fever, and HIV/AIDS, the current virus transmission was also believed to be a result of humans having excessively destroyed nature and come into close contact with wild animals. It was, however, rumored later that the virus might have happened due to a leak from a laboratory at the Virus Research Institute in that city. In any case, the virus has spread all over the world very rapidly and extensively. As of September the 15th, 2021, the number of infected people amounts to 226 million, or 3% of the world population, among which 4.6 million people have died. While in the United States, 41 million people have been infected and 664,000 have died. In India, 33 million people have been infected and 443,000 have died. The numbers of infection and death are respectively 1.6 million and 17,000 in Japan. The truth about where the virus originated is still unknown, but it is clear that it has spread mainly among people living in cities. When the Japanese government urged people not to meet with each other last year, it was impressive to read what was written by Mr. Soichi Yamashita, a farmer in Saga Prefecture, Kyushu. He mentioned in his blog that they ask us not to meet people, but there is hardly anyone we could meet here. The problem here is not coronavirus, but that there are no people around and farm fields are thus neglected. This statement reminds us that the current virus expansion in overpopulated areas and community breakdown in underpopulated ones are the two sides of the same coin. In addition, the virus contagion is taking place across the world, a sign of globalization in which people are moving from one place to another very rapidly and frequently. When the global movement of people and commercial goods was stopped to a large extent last year, canals in Venice were said to have become purified, and so was the air about Los Angeles. It was also said that the top of Himalayas became visible from the city of New Delhi. These few examples may caution us not to revive overheated transportation, which would lead to further environmental degradation when we get out of the current pandemic predicament. Indeed, it may be a little simple-minded if we are only eager to vaccinate ourselves to revive the economy as soon as possible. Even before that, it is more important to think about the socioeconomic structures we have been building that allowed the virus to spread in such an extensive and rapid manner. Perhaps we may have to at least think back over the process of industrialization, or what Gandhiji called modern civilization. In 1909, Gandhiji wrote in his Hindu Swaraj that it is my deliberate opinion that India is being ground down not under the English heel, but under that of modern civilization. Observing capitalism developing in Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries, Gandhiji found materialism to be the main characteristic of modern civilization, in which spirituality seemed to be undervalued. That is, the people of Europe today live in better built houses than they did 100 years ago. And this is considered an emblem of civilization. Now they are enslaved by temptation of money and luxuries that money can buy. This civilization takes note neither of morality nor of religion. Gandhiji severely condemned material development driven by capitalists utilizing machinery as follows. At present, the machine is helping a small minority to live on the exploitation of the masses. And the motive force of this minority is not humanity and love of their kind, but greed and avarice. Machinery is the chief symbol of modern civilization. It represents a great sin. To Gandhiji, civilization in the real sense of the term consists not in the multiplication, but in the deliberate and voluntary reduction of wants. At this point, he also found a weakness on the side of Indians who were tempted by that civilization. He says, "How can Manchester be blamed? We wore Manchester clothes, and that is why Manchester wore it." At this juncture, I'd like to draw your attention to Gandhiji's criticism of railways in his Hindu Swaraj. He says, "The railways too have spread a bubonic plague. Without them, masses could not move from place to place. They are the carriers of plague germs. Formerly, we had natural segregation." It is as if this statement well anticipated the current worldwide pandemic more than 100 years ahead of its time, and this was even before the Spanish influenza. Another important argument of Gandhiji's in his Hindu Swaraj is on doctors. He says, "I have indulged in vice. I contract a disease. A doctor cures me. The odds are that I shall repeat the vice. The fact remains that the doctors induce us to indulge, and the result is that we have become deprived of self-control." To Gandhiji, a Swaraj does not simply mean political independence or home rule of one nation, but also means that we learn to rule ourselves, even at the level of the individual. To apply this idea to the current situation of our pandemic, we may have to discipline ourselves instead of expecting any effective government policies to prevent the disease. Each one of us may stay home for, say, 2 or 3 weeks, not because our government demands we do so, but truly spontaneously. It may look like hartal that Indian people observed with Gandhiji during the non-cooperation movement. If we did it worldwide simultaneously, perhaps we wouldn't have to worry about the chronic cycle of infection that keeps peaking and waning indefinitely. This would be possible without our relying upon possibly risky vaccination whose side effects are still unknown. Back in the 19th century, European societies competed over natural resources and markets in non-Western ones to promote industrialization at home and divided the latter to occupy as their colonies. This drove them into world wars in the 20th century. Observing this course of history, Gandhiji firmly opposed the idea that India industrialized herself on a large scale. On the contrary, Gandhiji advocated revitalizing handicraft industries, including hand spinning and hand weaving. In India as well, domestic capitalists started textile industries in the middle of the 19th century and produced cotton cloths by machines on a larger scale in the early 20th century. Given such circumstances, Gandhiji conducted the Charkha movement in order to provide the poor with as many working opportunities as possible. A charkha is a traditional spinning wheel whose technology is simple and hence at an extremely low level. Based on the amount of cloth produced and the number of people employed around 1930, the per capita productivity of a charkha would be calculated as only 1/63rd of a machine. Why then was Gandhiji sticking with this, despite its extremely low productivity? This question puzzled me for nearly 10 years. The answer I realized was that, in a nutshell, the lower the technology, the more people could have a share. That is, a charkha would be potentially able to create 63 times more working opportunities than a machine. According to a Mainichi Shimbun online article dated September 3rd this year, His Excellency, Mr. Varma, recalled that there was a charkha at his grandparents' home and they offered khadi to the god, and that His Excellency himself also enjoyed the tranquil time of spinning at school. Proud of khadi as a symbol of freedom, His Excellency was quoted as saying, "The peace and non-violence that Gandhiji embodied throughout his life are also the guiding principles for me as a diplomat." Ultimately, Gandhiji thought as ideal an Indian society based on not cities but on villages. An ideal village would be simple but self-sufficient and possessing full powers as a basic unit of Indian Swaraj. He says, independence must begin at the bottom. Thus, every village will be a republic or panchayat having full powers. People living there would not be much interested in overseas markets and resources, finding it unnecessary to hold any strong military power. To Gandhiji, it was a village-based India that would contribute to world peace. He says, independent India can only discharge her duty towards a growing world by adopting a simple but ennobled life by developing her thousands of cottage industries and living at peace with the world. Now, I am concluding this talk. It may not necessarily be our choice to vaccinate ourselves as soon as possible in order to revitalize urban-centered economies. The Japanese government carried out its Go to Travel and Go to Eat campaigns to aid the economy last year, but these campaigns also encouraged the pandemic, which was easily anticipated well in advance. We may have to boldly stop the whole economy instead until the virus is completely gone, not by any forceful government policy, but by our own willingness for self-control. The government would have to encourage non-violently city-dwelling people to disperse gradually to less populated areas. In the meantime, it should endeavor to collect financial resources from every corner of society in order to support people depending on the monetary economy for the moment. Defense expenses have to become the least, since now is not the time to fight among humans, each one of whom is being equally threatened by the same enemy. The current predicament reminds us that the issue is not just how to suppress the pandemic technically, but what type of society we want to establish. The problem is that we always seek economic growth. To obtain more money means to take a greater share than others do, unless the scale of the whole economy is expanded. Since human activities are hitting the planetary boundary in the forms of global warming, deforestation, air and water pollution, species extinction, and so on, infinite economic growth is clearly impossible. In order to pursue Ivan Illich's idea of conviviality, both intra and intergenerational, we would have to give up our greed to remain in the human scale economy. Here, intergenerational conviviality is extremely important, since, for example, global warming caused by people in the present day would victimize those in the future. The former would also have to stop wasting the limited resources on the earth so that the latter could also have access to them. Today, I talked about Gandhiji's thoughts in conjunction with the current spread of COVID-19. Last but not least, I would like to share with you a passage of Gandhiji's that Ernst Schumacher quoted. That is, the earth would provide enough to satisfy everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Here is a fundamental insight for all of us who are responsible to establish a society that is economically, socially, and environmentally sound. This suggests to all of us a way out of all the blind alley of modern civilization. Thank you very much for your attention. Dhanyawad.